The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. They had catalogued more than 12,000 spacefaring civilizations across the known universe. Every species followed the same pattern. When they discovered how to travel faster than light, they announced themselves to the galaxy. They broadcast their achievements. They made demands. They claimed territory. They wanted everyone to know they had arrived. This was the natural order of things. The cosmic stage was meant for performers, and every new species wanted their moment in the spotlight. Humanity did not follow this pattern. The first human probes crossed beyond their solar system quietly. They made no broadcasts. They sent no messages. The Concord's monitoring stations detected them, of course. The Concord saw everything, but the probes simply drifted past, collecting data, saying nothing. The Concord waited for the announcement that never came. Years passed. Human ships began appearing in nearby star systems. They built colonies on empty worlds. They mined asteroids. They established trade routes between their own settlements. But they never once tried to contact the greater galactic community. Ambassador Velketh of the Therian Dominion was the first to take official notice. He was a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, and he had spent 3 centuries studying new species. He had seen hundreds of civilizations make first contact. All of them had been eager, nervous, or aggressive. None of them had been silent. "This is unusual," he told his staff. "They know we exist. Our signals fill the galaxy. Yet they say nothing." He requested permission to send a diplomatic envoy to human space. The Concord Assembly granted it without much thought. Humanity was small. Humanity was young. Humanity was not important enough to worry about. The first envoy ship carried 12 diplomats from 6 different species. They were experts in first contact. They had protocols for every situation. They entered human space with their weapons powered down and their communication channels open. They found a human colony on a world called New Eden. It was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green forests. The humans had built simple cities near the coastlines, nothing impressive by galactic standards. The envoy ship requested permission to land. To everyone's surprise, the humans granted it. Ambassador Velketh received the report 3 months later. It was short. The diplomats had landed safely. They had been greeted by human representatives. They had been shown around the colony. They had been offered food and shelter. And then they had decided to stay. "We are remaining here," the message said. "Do not send others. We are happy." Velketh read the message several times. He did not understand. These were trained diplomats. They had families back home. They had careers, responsibilities, lives. Why would they abandon everything to live on a primitive human colony? He sent a second envoy. The same thing happened. The diplomats arrived, met with humans, and chose to stay. Their final message was almost identical. "We are staying. Do not send others." A third envoy was sent, then a fourth. Each time, the diplomats vanished into human space, sending back only brief messages before going silent forever. Velketh presented his findings to the full Concord Assembly. The great chamber was filled with representatives from thousands of species. Some were massive creatures that breathed methane. Others were small beings made of living crystal. All of them listened as Velketh described the mystery of humanity. "We have lost 47 diplomats," he said. "None of them are dead. None of them are prisoners. They simply chose to stay. I do not know why. The humans will not explain, and our people will not come home." The assembly murmured with confusion. This had never happened before. High Sovereign Morax of the Krellian Empire rose from his seat. He was an enormous creature covered in black armor plates. His species had conquered half a galaxy before joining the Concord. They respected only strength, and they had no patience for mysteries. "This is simple," Morax said, his mandibles clicking with contempt. "The humans are primitive creatures. They are afraid of us. They hide in their burrows like prey animals, hoping we will ignore them. Your diplomats were weak-minded fools who fell for some simple trick." Many in the assembly nodded. It made sense. New species were often intimidated by the power of the Concord. Perhaps humans were simply too scared to engage. "They are not worth our attention," Morax continued. "They have nothing we want. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their military is non-existent. Let them cower in their corner of the galaxy. They will come to us eventually, begging for protection or trade. They always do." Scholar Vithani of the Illuminate Collective raised a gentle objection. She was a being of pure light contained in a crystalline shell, and her species valued knowledge above all else. "Should we not investigate further?" she asked. "Their behavior is strange. Strange behavior often hides important truths." Morax laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. "You academics always want to study everything. Some things are not worth studying. Humans are prey. Prey hides. There is nothing more to understand." The assembly voted to classify humanity as a non-participatory minor species. This was the lowest category in the Concord system. It meant humanity would receive no diplomatic attention, no trade agreements, no military protection. They would be ignored completely until they chose to participate in galactic society. Ambassador Velketh voted against the classification. He could not explain why, but something about humanity bothered him. Their silence felt purposeful. Their patience felt deliberate. But his single vote meant nothing against the thousands who agreed with High Sovereign Morax. The decision was made. Humanity was forgotten. Over the following decades, Velketh kept watching from a distance. He tracked human expansion through telescope data and intercepted signals. They grew slowly, but steadily. 200 colonies became 300. Their ships became faster, their cities larger. And still they said nothing. Once, Velketh managed to intercept a fragment of human communication between two of their ships. He expected to find fear, or uncertainty, or discussions about the greater galaxy. Instead, he found something that kept him awake for many nights afterward. The humans were talking about art, about music, about their children and their gardens and their hopes for the future. They spoke of the stars not with fear, but with patience. They discussed the Concord only briefly, and their words were not what Velketh expected. "They are still young," one human said. "Give them time. They might learn." The message chilled Velketh to his core. The humans were not hiding from the galaxy. They were not afraid of the great powers that surrounded them. They were waiting. But waiting for what? Velketh never found the answer. He died a century later, still troubled by the mystery of the silent species. His research was archived and forgotten. The Concord continued on, confident in its power, secure in its judgment. Humanity was weak. Humanity was primitive. Humanity was nothing to worry about. This was the Concord's first mistake. It would not be their last. In the cold silence between stars, humanity watched and waited. They had been watching since the first day they left their homeworld. They had seen the great empires rise and fall. They had witnessed the cruelties that powerful species inflicted upon the weak. They had recorded everything, judged everything, and said nothing. Their silence was not fear. Their silence was patience. And one day, that patience would run out. 80 galactic cycles passed. Old empires grew older. New powers rose and fell. The Concord continued its endless politics of trade and war and diplomacy. Humanity was almost completely forgotten. They were a footnote in old databases, a minor curiosity mentioned in outdated reports. Their 200 worlds had grown to 300, and their 300 had grown to 400, but they remained silent, and the galaxy had learned to ignore silent things. High Sovereign Morax had died long ago, but his legacy lived on. His grandson's grandson, Sovereign Tyrell, now ruled the Krellian Empire. He was young and hungry and eager to prove himself. His ancestors had conquered half the galaxy. He wanted to conquer the other half. Tyrell studied maps of unclaimed space, looking for easy targets. His advisors pointed to various minor species that could be absorbed without much trouble, but Tyrell's eyes kept returning to one region, the quiet corner of the galaxy where humanity lived. "What do we know about these humans?" he asked. His chief advisor, a scarred veteran named Korth, pulled up the old files. "Very little, my sovereign. They are classified as a non-participatory minor species. No military presence detected. Technology estimated at least 3 centuries behind our own. They have never engaged in combat with any Concord species." Tyrell smiled. His teeth were sharp and black. 400 worlds, and they have never fought anyone? "That is correct, my sovereign." "Then they will not know how to fight us." Korth hesitated. He was old enough to remember the stories about lost diplomats. "My sovereign, there are some unusual reports in the files. Several diplomatic missions disappeared in human space. The diplomats chose to stay and never returned." Tyrell waved his armored hand dismissively. "Weak minds, easily tricked. Humans are prey animals. My great-great-grandfather understood this. Prey does not fight. Prey runs and hides. He ordered the third subjugation fleet to be assembled. 4,000 warships gathered at the edge of Krellian space. It was the largest military force deployed in decades. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. Together, they could burn entire star systems. Tyrell chose his target carefully. A human colony called New Valencia, located on the outer edge of human space. It was a farming world, home to perhaps 2 million humans. There were no military installations detected, no defense platforms, no warships. It would be an easy victory. The first of many, the third subjugation fleet jumped into the New Valencia system on a bright morning by the colony's local time. 4,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their weapons were charged. Their soldiers were ready. Their sovereign watched from his command throne aboard the flagship, eager to witness humanity's surrender. What they found surprised them. The system was empty. No defense fleet. No orbital platforms. No weapons of any kind. Just a peaceful blue-green planet turning slowly in the light of its sun. And one ship. It was small. Perhaps 1/100th the size of the smallest Krellian vessel. It was matte black, with no visible weapons or engines. It hung in space between the fleet and the planet, alone and seemingly helpless. Tyrell laughed when he saw it. Is this their defense? One ship? The black ship broadcast a message. The voice was human, calm and clear, speaking perfect Krellian. You have entered human space without permission. Leave now. This is your only warning. The bridge of Tyrell's flagship erupted in laughter. 4,000 warships against one tiny vessel, and the humans were issuing warnings. It was absurd. It was insulting. Destroy that ship, Tyrell ordered. Then begin the bombardment of the colony. I want the humans to see what happens when prey tries to threaten predators. The weapons officer acknowledged the order. Targeting systems locked onto the black ship. 100 plasma cannons prepared to fire. Then everything went wrong. The black ship moved. Not moved. It seemed to fold space around itself, appearing in one place and then another without crossing the distance between. It passed through the Krellian formation like a shadow through light, and wherever it passed, ships died. There was no visible weapon, no beam of energy, no missile, no explosion. Ships simply stopped. Their lights went dark. Their engines fell silent. Their weapons powered down. They drifted through space, dead and cold, as if they had been abandoned for 1,000 years. Tyrell watched in horror as his mighty fleet was dismantled. The black ship moved through them without stopping, without slowing, without any apparent effort. It was like watching a single small animal walk through a field and leave only corpses behind. Fire! Tyrell screamed. All ships, fire at will. They tried. Thousands of weapons locked onto the black ship and fired. Plasma beams cut through space. Missiles streaked toward their target. Energy weapons of every kind filled the void with destruction. None of them hit. The black ship was never where the weapons expected it to be. It danced through the barrage like it was moving through rain, untouched and unconcerned. The killing continued. 1 hour passed. 2 hours. 3. The third subjugation fleet, the pride of the Krellian Empire, was reduced to a graveyard. 4,000 warships drifted dead in the void. Their crews sat at their stations, unmoving. By the 6th hour, it was over. The black ship returned to its original position, floating peacefully between the debris field and the planet it had protected. It broadcast one final message. Warning delivered. Do not return. Then it went silent. Sovereign Tyrell's flagship was the only ship that still had power. Its systems had been left partially functional, just enough to send a message home, just enough to let the Krellian Empire know what had happened. Tyrell sat on his command throne, unable to speak. Around him, his crew stood frozen at their stations. They were breathing. Their hearts were beating, but their eyes were empty, and they did not respond to any commands. He was alone on a ship of ghosts. 3 cycles later, a Krellian rescue fleet arrived to retrieve what was left. They found the flagship drifting among the wreckage, its distress beacon still flashing. Inside, they found Sovereign Tyrell sitting on his throne, staring at nothing. He never spoke again. The crew was dead. All of them. Medical scans showed that every neural pathway in their brains had been severed, cleanly and completely. They had not suffered. They had not struggled. Death had come to them quietly, peacefully, like a gentle hand closing tired eyes. Their faces wore expressions of confusion, as if death had been an unexpected guest at a dinner party. The Krellian Empire demanded answers. They sent furious messages to human space, threatening war, demanding explanations, promising revenge. They expected defiance or fear or negotiation. They received 4 words. We asked them nicely. No further explanation, no apology, no threat. Just 4 words, delivered without emotion, and then silence again. The galaxy heard about New Valencia. News spread through every system, every station, every world. The story grew with each telling. 4,000 warships destroyed by a single vessel. The mighty Krellian Empire humiliated by a species they had dismissed as prey. Some called it luck. Others called it a trick. But everyone called it impossible. Scholar Vethani of the Illuminate Collective was very old now. But she remembered the research of Ambassador Velkith. She remembered his warnings about the silent species. She began to dig through ancient files, looking for answers. What she found would change everything. Humanity had never been hiding. They had never been afraid. And they were not nearly as primitive as everyone believed. The galaxy was about to learn a terrible truth about the silent watchers in the dark. The destruction of the Third Subjugation Fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the great powers of the Concord felt something they had almost forgotten. Fear. Intelligence agencies across every empire scrambled to gather information about humanity. Spies were sent. Probes were launched. Secret missions crossed into human space, trying to learn anything about the species that had remained silent for so long. Most of the spies never came back. The probes sent data for a few days before going silent. The secret missions simply vanished, leaving no trace, no evidence, no clue about what had happened to them. But some information did make it through, and what it revealed was far worse than anyone had imagined. Scholar Vethani worked without rest, collecting every scrap of data she could find. She was ancient now. Her crystalline shell cracked and clouded with age, but her mind remained sharp. She had been studying the galaxy for 600 years, and she had never encountered a mystery like this one. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A maintenance worker on a Concord space station had noticed something strange during a routine inspection. Tiny machines, smaller than dust particles, were embedded in the hull plating. They were so small that normal sensors could not detect them. Vethani obtained samples. She studied them under the most powerful microscopes available. What she found made her light flicker with fear. The machines were receivers. They were listening to everything that happened on the station, every conversation, every transmission, every secret whispered in private chambers. And they were old. The decay patterns suggested they had been in place for at least 200 years. She ordered similar inspections across the Concord. The results were terrifying. The machines were everywhere. They were woven into the hulls of warships. They drifted through the atmospheres of homeworlds. They were embedded in the walls of government buildings, the circuits of communication devices, the very air that Concord citizens breathed. Human probes had been seeding them for centuries. Every time a human vessel passed through Concord space, it left millions of these tiny watchers behind. They had spread across the galaxy like invisible dust, settling into every crack and corner of civilization. Humanity had not been hiding from the Concord. They had been watching it. Vethani calculated the coverage. If every machine was actively reporting, humanity would have access to nearly all communications in Concord space. Every secret treaty, every planned betrayal, every weapon development, every lie spoken in supposedly secure chambers. They knew everything. Vethani brought her findings to the Concord Assembly. The great chamber was packed with representatives from every major power. The Krellian Empire was there, still reeling from their defeat. The Therian Dominion was there, remembering their lost diplomats. Hundreds of other species filled the seats, all of them hungry for answers. Humanity is not what we believed, Vethani began. Her voice was steady, but her light pulsed with barely contained alarm. They have been observing us since before most current governments existed. Their technology is not behind ours, it is ahead, centuries ahead, perhaps more. She projected images of the tiny machines. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. These devices are beyond our ability to replicate. We do not understand how they work. We do not know how to detect them. We do not know how to remove them. They are in our ships, our stations, our worlds. They have been there for generations. A Krellian admiral rose from his seat. His voice was angry, but there was fear beneath the anger. If they are so advanced, why have they not attacked? Why do they hide? Vethani paused before answering. I do not believe they are hiding. I believe they are judging. Silence fell over the assembly. Consider their behavior, Vethani continued. They refuse to engage with us diplomatically. They refuse to trade, to negotiate, to participate in galactic society. They simply watched. They watched us make war on each other. They watched us enslave weaker species. They watched us commit atrocities against those who could not defend themselves. She let her words sink in. I believe humanity was testing us. They wanted to see what kind of civilization we would build when we thought no one was watching. And I believe we failed their test. The assembly erupted in argument. Some demanded immediate war against humanity. Others called for negotiations. Still others simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the idea that they had been observed and judged for centuries. In the chaos, Vethani displayed one more piece of data. It was a graph showing human technological development over the past 300 years. The line started low, roughly where Concord analysts had estimated. Then, about 250 years ago, it began to climb. It climbed slowly at first. Then faster still. The curve grew steeper and steeper, until it went almost vertical. This is what we can estimate from the machines we found, Vethani said. Their technology surpassed ours approximately 2 centuries ago. Since then, the gap has only grown. We do not know where the line ends. We do not know what they are capable of now. She turned to face the assembly directly. The ship that destroyed the Krellian fleet was not their best weapon. It was not their last resort. It was a messenger, sent to deliver a warning. And if the warning was that powerful, imagine what they are keeping in reserve. The assembly fell silent again. Representatives who had ruled empires for thousands of years looked at each other with new eyes. They had spent so long fighting among themselves, competing for power, believing they were the masters of the galaxy. Now they understood the truth. They were not the apex predators. They had never been. They were specimens in a cage, watched by something far more powerful than they could imagine. Every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of violence, all of it had been recorded. Humanity knew their sins. In the weeks that followed, the Concord tried to respond. They formed committees to study the human machines. They deployed teams to search for more surveillance devices. They attempted to send new diplomatic missions to human space. The committees made no progress. The devices were too advanced to analyze. The diplomatic missions were turned back at the border of human space, without explanation, and through it all, humanity remained silent. But there were signs that the silence would not last forever. Human ships began appearing at the edges of Concord space more frequently. They never attacked, never communicated, never did anything threatening. They simply watched. Visible now instead of hidden. It felt like a countdown. Vethani spent her final years trying to understand what humanity wanted. She analyzed their culture, their history, their philosophy. She studied the few communications that had been intercepted over the centuries. In the end, she came to a simple conclusion. Humanity valued life. They valued kindness. They valued the potential for growth and change. They had watched the conquered and seen cruelty, greed, and destruction. They had seen powerful species crushing the weak without mercy, and they had been waiting to see if it would change. They gave us time, Vethani wrote in her final report. Time to become better. Time to grow beyond our violent past. But time is not infinite. Their patience has limits, and when that patience runs out, I do not know what will follow. She died shortly after completing the report. It was classified and archived. Another warning that would go unheeded. The Concord continued its old ways. Empires still fought for territory. Powerful species still enslaved the weak. The galaxy still burned with the fires of greed and ambition. And in the darkness between stars, humanity continued to watch. They were waiting for something. The galaxy was about to find out what. The Vorith Syndicate was not an empire. They did not hold territory or build monuments to their power. They were criminals on a galactic scale, smugglers, slavers, and thieves who operated in the shadows between legitimate governments. For centuries, the Syndicate had survived by being useful to the powerful. They sold weapons to warring empires. They provided slaves to species that wanted them. They moved illegal goods across borders that honest traders could not cross. Everyone knew they were evil, but everyone used their services. The Syndicate's leader was a creature named Vorith Prime, the latest in a long line of criminals who had taken that name. He was cold, calculating, and completely without conscience. He had ordered the deaths of millions without losing a moment of sleep. When news spread about the destruction of the Krellian fleet, Vorith Prime saw an opportunity. The humans have technology beyond anything the Concord possesses, he told his inner circle. If we could obtain even a fraction of their secrets, we would become unstoppable. No government could touch us. No empire could threaten us. His lieutenants agreed. But how could they force humans to share their secrets? The Krellians had tried military force and been crushed. Vorith Prime smiled his cold smile. The Krellians tried to take territory. We will take something more valuable. We will take their people. The Syndicate began planning the most ambitious operation in their history. Human colony ships traveled between worlds on a regular schedule. They carried sleeping passengers in suspended animation families moving to new homes, workers traveling to distant jobs, children and elderly, and everyone in between. The ships were large and slow, designed for comfort rather than combat. They were vulnerable. The Syndicate chose their target carefully. A colony ship called the Horizon, carrying 40,000 sleeping passengers from Earth to a new settlement on the edge of human space. It was far from any protection. Traveling through empty space between stars, they struck without warning. Syndicate warships surrounded the Horizon before its crew could react. Boarding parties stormed through the airlocks. The small security team fought bravely but was quickly overwhelmed. Within hours, the ship belonged to the Syndicate. Vorith Prime broadcast his demands to the entire galaxy. He showed images of the captured ship, the sleeping passengers helpless in their pods, the Syndicate logo painted across the hull. Humanity has hidden its secrets for too long, he declared. Now they will share them. We demand complete technical specifications for all human technology, weapons, ships, power sources, everything. We demand schematics for their surveillance devices. We demand access to their research databases. He paused for dramatic effect. If these demands are not met within 60 galactic cycles, we will begin executing passengers. 1,000 per cycle until the humans comply. 40,000 lives are in our hands. Their fate depends on humanity's choice. The Concord watched in shock. No one had ever attacked humans directly before. No one had ever threatened their civilians. Everyone waited to see what would happen. For 30 cycles, nothing happened. Human space remained silent. No response. No negotiation. No threats or pleas or counteroffers. Just silence. The same silence that had defined humanity for 3 centuries. Some thought the humans did not care about their people. Others thought they were planning something. A few hoped the situation would simply resolve itself. On the 31st cycle, humanity answered. It happened everywhere at once. Every screen, every communication device, every neural interface across the entire Concord displayed the same image. There was no warning, no transition, no way to block it. One moment, beings across the galaxy were going about their lives. The next moment, they were all looking at the same face. It was a human face. A woman, old but not elderly, with gray hair cut short and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of patience. Her skin was weathered by time and experience. Her expression was calm, but there was something behind that calm that made even the bravest warriors look away. "I am called the Speaker," she said. Her voice was quiet but somehow carried weight, as if the universe itself was listening. "I speak for humanity." Every being in the galaxy stopped what they were doing. Governments paused mid-session. Armies halted their advances. Even the Syndicate, watching from their hidden bases, fell silent. "We left you alone," the Speaker continued. "For 300 years, we watched you from a distance. We saw you make war on each other. We saw you enslave the weak. We saw you commit acts of cruelty that we could barely comprehend. But we said nothing. We hoped you would grow. We hoped you would change. We hoped you would become something better." Her voice never rose, never showed anger. It was worse than anger. It was disappointment. "Instead, you took our children." The image shifted. Behind the Speaker, something appeared. At first, it looked like stars, thousands of points of light arranged in perfect formations. Then the scale became clear. They were ships, not hundreds of ships, not thousands, hundreds of thousands. They emerged from folds in space that should not have existed, from positions that should have been empty. They filled the void behind the speaker like an ocean of steel and fire. Every ship in that fleet was a weapon. Every weapon was aimed at the galaxy that had finally pushed humanity too far. The Vorath Syndicate has held our people for 30 cycles, the speaker said. We have been patient. We are always patient. But patience is not infinite. She looked directly into the transmission, and somehow, every being who watched felt that she was looking at them personally. The Syndicate has 30 hours to return our people unharmed, all 40,000 passengers, in the same condition they were taken. There will be no negotiation. There will be no extension. There will be no second chances. Her voice finally showed a hint of emotion. Not anger, something colder. If they do not comply, the Vorath Syndicate will cease to exist. Every ship they own will be destroyed. Every station will be dismantled. Every world where they have established themselves will be cleansed of their presence. We will not stop until the Syndicate is nothing but a memory. She paused. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. You have 30 hours. The transmission ended. Screens across the galaxy returned to normal. But nothing was normal anymore. The Syndicate panicked. Vorath Prime tried to contact humanity, to negotiate, to beg for more time. His messages went unanswered. He tried to move the colony ship to a new location, but his navigation systems had stopped working. He tried to call for help from his allies in various governments, but none of them wanted to be associated with the Syndicate anymore. 29 hours passed. In the final hour, the Syndicate released the horizon. They broadcast images of the colony ship being escorted away from their territory by their own vessels. They announced that all passengers were unharmed, that the whole situation had been a misunderstanding, that they had never intended to hurt anyone. Human ships appeared to reclaim the horizon. They said nothing to the Syndicate vessels. They simply took their people and left. But humanity was not finished. The speaker appeared once more, this time only on Syndicate channels. Her message was brief. You returned our people. That is why you will be allowed to continue existing for now. But we have marked you. We know every ship you own, every base you operate, every being who serves your organization. If you ever touch human lives again, if you ever threaten our people in any way, the promise we made will be fulfilled. She leaned closer. And we always keep our promises. The transmission ended. The Syndicate survived. But it was broken. Half their members deserted in the following weeks, terrified of the invisible mark that humanity had placed on them. Their reputation for untouchability was destroyed. They had challenged humanity and lost without a single shot being fired. The galaxy had witnessed something it had never seen before. The silent species had spoken, and when they spoke, empires trembled. But the speaker's message had been about more than just the Syndicate. It had been a warning to everyone. Humanity was no longer watching from the shadows. They were no longer content to simply observe and judge. Something had changed. A line had been crossed. And now, for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was paying attention to the galaxy. What came next would change everything. The Concord Assembly had never been so full. Representatives from every species, every empire, every faction in the known galaxy had gathered in the Great Chamber. They came not for politics or trade or the usual business of civilization. They came because humanity had requested an audience. For 300 years, humanity had refused every invitation to join the galactic community. Now, they were coming on their own terms, and no one dared refuse them. Security was heavy around the chamber. Warships from a dozen different empires orbited the station, ready to respond to any threat. Soldiers lined every corridor. Weapons were primed and pointed at nothing, because no one knew what to expect. The speaker arrived alone. She walked through the main entrance without guards or escorts. She was an ordinary-looking human, short, gray-haired, wearing simple clothing without any markings of rank or status. She carried no visible weapons. She showed no sign of fear. Every eye in the chamber followed her as she walked to the center of the floor. The most powerful beings in the galaxy watched in silence as this single human took her place before them. "Thank you for receiving me," the speaker said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I know this is unusual. We have been silent for a very long time." High Commander Krall of the Krellian Empire rose from his seat. He was the great-great-grandson of the sovereign who had first dismissed humanity as prey. His family had spent generations building back their reputation after the Valencia silence. "You destroyed 4,000 of our ships," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You humiliated our empire. You owe us an explanation." The speaker turned to face him. "Your ancestors sent those ships to enslave a human colony. They were warned. They chose to attack anyway. We defended ourselves. You call that defense? You killed. We killed no one at New Valencia," the speaker interrupted. "Your crews died peacefully, without suffering. They died because your sovereign refused to listen. We gave him every chance to turn back. He chose to press forward. The consequences were his choice, not ours." Krull wanted to argue, but something in the speaker's eyes stopped him. He sat down without another word. The speaker looked around the chamber. "I know you all have questions. I know you are afraid. You have been afraid since the day you realized we were watching. But I did not come here to threaten you or to frighten you. I came to offer you a choice." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She placed it on the floor, and it projected a hologram that filled the center of the chamber. It was a list. Names, dates, and descriptions scrolled past faster than anyone could read. The list seemed endless, stretching on until it filled the entire room with glowing text. "For 300 years we have been watching you," the speaker said. "We have recorded everything. Every war you have fought, every atrocity you have committed, every life you have destroyed or enslaved or ruined for your own gain." She let the list continue scrolling. "We have cataloged 11,000 acts of genocide. We have counted 42 billion sapient beings sold into slavery across your various empires. We have documented 216 species driven to extinction by your government, species that will never exist again because you decided they were inconvenient." The chamber was completely silent. Even the most powerful beings in the room could not look away from the endless list of horrors. "We have names," the speaker continued. "We have evidence. We know who gave the orders, who carried them out, who profited from the suffering of others. Nothing has been forgotten. Nothing has been forgiven." She turned off the device. The list disappeared, but its weight remained in the air. "When we first left our homeworld, we dreamed of finding other intelligent life. We imagined civilizations that had grown beyond violence and cruelty. We hoped to find wisdom among the stars." Her voice carried a deep sadness. "Instead, we found you. We found empires built on conquest and slavery. We found species that measured their worth by how many others they could dominate. We found a galaxy drowning in blood." She shook her head slowly. "We could have destroyed you. From the moment we achieved technological superiority, we could have swept through your empires like fire through dry grass. You would not have been able to stop us. You would not have been able to fight back." She looked around the chamber. "But that is not who we are. We do not believe in conquest. We do not believe in punishment without purpose. We believe that all species have the capacity to grow, to change, to become something better than they were." For the first time, her voice softened. "That is why we waited. That is why we watched. We wanted to give you the chance to evolve on your own. We wanted to see if you could learn compassion without being forced to learn it." Her expression hardened again. "You did not. In 300 years, the cruelty has only grown worse. The strong continue to crush the weak. The powerful continue to exploit the powerless. You have had every opportunity to change, and you have wasted them all." She took a deep breath. "So now we must intervene, not with weapons, not with destruction, but with a choice." She raised her hand, and new images appeared around the chamber. They showed plans and documents and organizational charts. "We are establishing tribunals, courts of justice that will review the crimes of the past 3 centuries. Leaders who ordered atrocities will be tried. Governments that participated in genocide will be held accountable. There will be consequences for what has been done." The chamber erupted in protest. Voices shouted about sovereignty, about interference, about the right of species to govern themselves. The speaker waited patiently until the noise died down. "You have 2 options," she said when silence returned. "The first is cooperation. Accept the tribunals. Face justice for your crimes. Work with us to build a new galactic order based on fairness and respect for all life. We will help you. We will guide you. We will be patient, as we have always been patient." She paused. "The second option is resistance. Refuse to cooperate. Try to fight us. Try to hide from judgment. Try to continue your old ways. Her eyes swept across the chamber, and something in them made even the bravest look away. If you choose resistance, you will discover why we were silent for so long. Not because we were weak, not because we were afraid, but because we were merciful. We did not want to become what you are. We did not want to become conquerors and destroyers. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone heard it clearly. Mercy, when rejected, becomes something else entirely. We have the power to enforce our will. We have chosen not to use it. But choices can change. Patience can end. And when it does, we will do what is necessary to protect the innocent from those who would harm them. She straightened and looked around the chamber one final time. You have one galactic cycle to decide. Discuss among yourselves. Consult your governments. Consider your options carefully. But understand this. We are no longer watching from the shadows. The age of silence is over. She turned to leave. We suggest you choose wisely. The speaker walked out of the chamber the same way she had entered, alone, unhurried, without fear. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word. When she was gone, the chamber remained frozen. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in their seats, unable to speak, unable to process what had just happened. For centuries, they had ruled through strength and fear. They had conquered and enslaved and destroyed without consequence. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the universe. Now they understood the truth. They had never been the apex predators. They had been specimens in a cage, watched by something far more powerful, far more patient, and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They had been given every chance to become better, and they had failed. Now the Watchers had spoken. Now the judgment had begun, and for the first time in the long history of the galaxy, the powerful knew what it felt like to be afraid. In the years that followed, many chose to cooperate. They accepted the tribunals. They faced justice for their crimes. They worked to build a better civilization under humanity's watchful guidance. Others chose to resist. They did not last long. The galaxy changed, not overnight, and not without struggle. But change came, slowly and steadily, as humanity had always known it would. The age of silent watching was over. The age of reckoning had begun, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the speaker looked out at the galaxy she had helped transform. She thought about all the years of waiting, all the patience, all the hope that one day, the civilizations of the cosmos would grow beyond their violent natures. It had taken longer than she had hoped. It had required more intervention than she had wanted. But finally, the galaxy was learning. Humanity's silence had been a gift, a chance for others to prove themselves worthy of respect. That gift had been rejected for too long. Now the silence was over, and the galaxy would never be the same.